everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Green Jeans. This is our episode 15. That's pretty exciting. For those of you who don't know, I am your one co-host, Annika Van Rossum, joined by my other co-host,
Maya Van Rossum.
And if you haven't listened to our podcast before, we are a mother-daughter duo who talks about important environmental and social justice issues through a generational lens.
Ooh, good times. And so, Annika, the last time you did a reptile fact check, it was so cool. I thought that we should have another reptile fact check because people really loved it and I loved it. So do you happen to have another reptile fact check?
I do. I have one in the bank. So this is just a fun, you can really show off to people if you want. So turtle or tortoise shell, either way, they are different animals. That is one fact check. But the other one is they have a top and a bottom, and the top part is called the carapace, and the bottom part is called the plastron, and then all the little scales are called scutes. So that's your fact check.
That is way cool. You are a great fact checker, man.
I tried, man.
Right. So we are going to jump right in today because we have a really great guest. Her name is Nicole Alanovich. She is a powerhouse advocate for the environment, for environmental justice, for social justice, for justice for all people. She is a veteran who has a very compelling, powerful story, and links her service to our nation with the power and importance of environmental protection. And that if you want to truly show appreciation for those who have served our country, one of the best things you can do for somebody like Nicole is protect our water, our air, and our environments. So with that, why don't we go ahead and bring Nicole into the conversation? Nicole Alanovich, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very, very excited to see you. We just did a quick introduction offline about how wonderful you are and about the power of your environmental activism, as well as your service to the nation and how you have blended together your service in the military with the power and importance of protecting our communities and showing true respect and justice for all people, including our environment. So we are excited to have you.
Oh, thank you. I think that for most of us who served, we know that our job doesn't end when we leave the service. If there's one thing that positive thing that we're trained to know is that service to country and service before self becomes just a part of your everyday life.
So go ahead, Annika.
Well, I was just going to say, Nicole, it's just been we gave you a little intro, but it's just been so inspiring to work with you and talk to you and hear, your story. And it's one that I'm excited. I'm sad that it is happening, but, people need to hear because it's so important and really just how strong of a human you are and everything you've been through and how still it's just always, I hate when amazing people like you have been so hurt by the world, but it's so beautiful that you are still fighting the good fight and standing up for people who also unfortunately can't be here today for so many reasons. And I just really want to say that and how inspiring you are and how anybody who's listening to this, Nicole will make you cry, but Nicole will also make you want to fight so much harder than I think anyone ever has because you're just such an inspiring human being.
Oh, I'm pregnant and haven't put makeup on, but you're going to make me cry, Annika. Seriously. I think when you are really harmed by the environment and by your government at a really young age, and I'm still, I'm 37, so I'm considered to be young, right? Young Dems go to the age of 36, so I'm just 1 year older out of that little cohort. That it is an overwhelming feeling to know that there are people who are older than me that are struggling and cannot speak, or there are people who are adjacent to me that feel like their voice isn't important, and one voice can really move mountains. And that's the goal, right? I just got off a call talking about the Green Amendment, and the question that was asked is, what brought you into caring about the Green Amendment? And there are a lot of veterans who served in many different conflicts and many different wars. And I think that, you know, I have my master's in social work and I have a master's in business. And in social work, we learn about healing, right? And healing trauma. And a lot of World War II veterans and Vietnam veterans had an opportunity to go back to conflict zones, and especially Vietnam veterans, to another war we should not have been at, and plant trees and meet families and talk to them and build a bridge that allowed healing, right? But for me, a Hispanic female, I don't think that I am ever going to be allowed into Iraq to shake the hands of the people that I may have harmed and I may have hurt. And it gives you this overwhelming hindsight bias that I become mad at the little 18-year-old girl who joined the military to go to college. I become upset at the 19-year-old who went and built bombs and harmed innocent brown bodies. And there's no way for me to bridge the amount of sorry that I have and to explain it, because they are forever going to be affected by the conflict that we brought there. And so coming home away from my own healing is to say, there are innocent brown, Black, and Indigenous bodies that are being harmed right here at home. And if I can't go and remedy what I did in another country with other innocent people, I can certainly take the tools in my toolbox that I have now and attempt to remedy some of the harm that is being imposed on us, that is being imposed on marginalized communities, BIPOC folks, especially our Indigenous and rural communities here in New Mexico, where they don't feel like they have a right to speak. And I think that we forget how powerful our First Amendment right is. I am firmly of the belief that our First Amendment right is stronger than any other. And that right is what is going to get us to get the Green Amendment for the generations across the finish line. But first, we have to talk, right? We have to use it. We have to practice it, just like we would a gun, just like we would any other of our constitutional rights, practicing them, not being afraid, being able to remove the stigma, being able to be humble. And I know where I went wrong in life, and I know where I want to go in the future, and making sure that I stay on that trajectory, not just for myself, but for the good of others. It is a very healing process to be able to help others that you'll never meet, you'll never shake their hands, future generations that I won't know. That means the world to me, to be able to stand up and go on record right now and say, what is going on is not right, right?
So Nicole, it's so powerful how you talk about other people, innocents being harmed and wanting to help and wanting to heal, and being sad that because of your service in the military, there are those innocents who were hurt. But the truth is, just knowing your story, when you went into the military, you were an innocent and you experienced things at the hands of the military that impact you, your body, and your health to this day. And they were inflicted upon you as an innocent. And I'm wondering, and they are informing how powerful and passionate you are about environmental protection and about your service to environmental protection for the benefit of others. And I'm wondering if you could bring into this conversation our listeners and share with them the story of what you experienced while serving the military and how your body and your health got harmed, again, as an innocent.
Yeah. So again, it's, the therapists call it a hindsight bias, because as I graduated high school a year early. So I hold myself up to the standard and went to college and looked like a Christmas tree when I graduated high school with all of my accolades. And I thought I was the smartest cookie in the cookie jar. So my proactive decision to join the military, in my mind, I keep saying, I did it to myself. I did it to myself. I did it to myself. But I think we can all agree that our government lied to us. It lied. It had all of us, save Bernie Sanders, thinking that we were getting into something that we shouldn't. And whether or not he believed there were weapons of mass destruction, he said, this is not our monkey. This is not our circus. We've got to stop. And so to bridge that, I'm still obviously struggling to say, that I was innocent going in, but I was 19, fresh out of the boat, literally the targeted population for the military industrial complex, a poor Hispanic woman who got a bill. My mom had taken out a parent loan. I graduated a year before I was supposed to without telling her. Went to college in Colorado. I lived in a dorm. My mom took out a parent loan, and I started receiving bills saying that she had already defaulted on the parent loan. So like any good daughter, I went online and I looked up how to go to school for free. And of course, that 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, nothing bad will happen to you, we'll pay for your college. That New Mexico Air National Guard got me hook, line, and sinker. And I thought I was just gonna get in, do 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. I was never gonna see conflict. And sure enough, I went to basic training, I went to tech school, and I immediately went to Iraq. We were one of the first units that were in theater. The Rocky Mountain Coalition, which is New Mexico, Colorado, and Montana, got activated. I was in Balad, which was one of the most dangerous bases, and to date, because Saddam had created a dual air base. One side was perfect for army, right? Sherpas, rocks, dirt, etc. And then the other was for the Air Force, right? So it was Camp Anaconda. And so when we were out there, our government, even after the first Gulf War conflict, sent us out there without proper PPE. We all know what that is now. We're all wearing masks. We're all aware of how far to stay away from one another. Now that we've had so many forest fires, and we now have alerts on the radio telling us when it's safe to inhale air and go outside. We weren't practicing that in 2003, right? In 2003, when I was deployed to Iraq, they sent us out there. We were using old equipment, being ammunitions, which is building bombs, stockpiling munitions, going through any kind of bullet, bomb, mortar that comes through the base. We didn't load them, but we created them. We had to be somewhere else on base that the enemy wouldn't think is where all of our bombs are, because the enemy is literally looking for the easiest target. And if you want an easy target, mass detonation and explosion and fragmentation is what you're looking for. So you're looking for our ammunition. So we were always targeted. And so the government thought of this great idea. You would never think that the bomb dump is by a billowing cloud of smoke, would you? You would think, okay, they're burning their trash there, there's fire there, there's hazard there, and therefore I'm not going to attempt to bomb that area. But that is exactly where our bomb dump was. You go forward, there is a burn pit, you go to the left, and right there, boom, is our bomb dump. Why? Because both of them are far enough from the flight line so that the other workers weren't subjected to the toxins that were in the pits, right? And so if you're thinking like, okay, well, what is this pit? When you're in war, it is a nicety to be able to take your trash outside, right? We think about our trash and how we take our trash out of our house and we put it on the side of the street and someone comes and picks it up and then we don't know what happens to it, right? It goes to some landfill. These fire pits burned everything on base, especially in the beginning of war. We couldn't risk lives, and this is the funny part, right? We couldn't risk lives taking our trash somewhere off base and disposing of it. So rather, styrofoam plates, plastic forks and silverware, fecal matter from the porta potties, shirts, tires from vehicles that had old tires were all put in a burn pit. Jet fuel, GP8, which you'll hear me say again, was poured on top of it, and it lit the skies day and night. Wow. Billowing clouds of just whatever chemical compounds, and we're breathing that 12 hours a day. Every person who was ammunition, anybody who had to get ammunition for us that we didn't take to the fight line, was subjected to breathing that in. And then on the other side, and then lucky chance that we weren't at the bomb dump for the day, we were in these houses. They're like little hangars where airplanes go, right? And instead there are bobtails and our trailers, but underneath is jet fuel. So if I wasn't inhaling fire, right? The wind from the burn pits, I was huffing jet fuel for 12 hours a day. And these were the conditions that they thought were okay for us in war.
Mhm.
So I got really, really sick when I was out there. I remember I was driving in a bobtail with one of my service members, and I told him to stop. I thought it was MRE. We had been on an MRE diet because we had been mortared so many times. If we're mortared, they don't open up the chow hall, right? And so I'm eating MREs. We're not used to it. We don't know you're not supposed to be exchanging. And I got really sick. And I thought it must be the MREs. But then we got out of the bobtails, and the bobtails are painted like this dark army green, right? And my vomit is bright neon green. And at first you're hot, and it's like 128 degrees at night in the shade. And so you're thinking, okay, I'm delusional. I haven't been sleeping. This is not what I'm seeing. And I start vomiting again. And this time it didn't land on the bobtail. This time we're seeing that this is actual neon green vomit coming out of my body. So I go to the flight doc, and the flight doc says, I'm not the only one who's experienced this. And he puts me on quarters in Iraq. So in Iraq, I'm on bed rest because something's going on with me. And I don't want to get into it, but it wasn't just coming out of the top, it was coming out of the bottom. And it was happening more with women, right? So they thought whatever was going on, they put it in my notes, they let me have bed rest. But after 3 days of bed rest in war, that's it. That's all you get. It's right back to business as usual. And we didn't know at the time what it would be. We had no clue what could be making me sick, right? But now, finally, after the 45 administration spent so much time denying that this was happening, thank God the Biden administration has now come forward and said, these burn pits were hazardous. These burn pits were toxic, and you were exposed to depleted uranium. So on top of being exposed to burn pits, we were exposed to depleted uranium. Anytime a mortar fell from the sky and shook vehicles, the same chemical nerve agents that Saddam put on his own people shook into the air, and we breathed it. We burned it. We burned it. We burned vehicles. We moved vehicles without proper PPE, not knowing what was on them, right? And they were bob wired off. And I'm lucky, little 19-year-old me wanted to show my mom what war was like, because you're going to come home and mom's going to say, what was it like? And I had my little Polaroid, and I took pictures. I took pictures of our food. I took pictures of the tanks that were wired off. I took pictures of the things I was allowed to take pictures of. And those pictures are what helped me win my case with the VA in order to get my disability claim passed, because there's this unfortunate truth that they deny till you die. But I'm too young to die right away. But that denial and continual denial that something was wrong with me ended up really messing with me mentally. I have learned to talk about behavioral health, because when your body is physically shutting down and they're saying, not me, I didn't do it, then you start to think you're crazy, and then you start to think you're worthless. I came back. I knew something was wrong with me. They tell you to hide it, because if you don't hide it, you get kicked out of the military. Then I got deployed to Montana, and Great Falls, Montana, if you've never been, it's like an ice box. It's covered, and then inside is Great Falls, right? So climate change caused a forest fire. And here I am trying to hide the fact that I can't breathe. And suddenly I'm on base, and it's visible that I can't breathe. So again, they send me to the flight doc. Flight doc says, you're going to go on profile. I go get a pulmonary function test, and they're like, this isn't looking good. I do a methacholine challenge. They confirm that the pulmonary function test isn't good. I go back to the flight doc. It was a private insurance because they didn't have a VA healthcare system in Great Falls at the time. I don't know if they do now. And I remember the doctor being very gentle with me. And there's this paperwork he had to fill out. And he said, I'm not going to be able to mark this box. And I remember thinking, like, why is he really talking to me slow? Like, okay. And the question was, can the service member wear their gas mask uninterrupted for an infinite amount of time? And I'm not thinking anything of it. And then he goes into explanation. We're going to have to give you stuff for breathing. We're going to have to give you inhalers. And if you're wearing your gas mask and you have an asthma attack, you can't take it off to take your inhaler. So I'm going to have to mark no on this box, okay? And he's telling me real slow. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe he thinks I'm slow. But then it hit me when I took that paperwork back to that same flight doc. He said, well, you're going to be processed because you're no longer expendable. Expendable.
Oh my God.
Expendable is what they think we are. We are either healthy enough to go die for our country, and if they make us unhealthy, then we can come back and die on our own. I got so sad that I attempted to take my life, and I got involuntarily institutionalized in Montana. So then my crew says, we're going to find something for you, because I'm crying. I gave up my youth. I went to war. I've given up everything. You know, I was a thespian. I was in French Honor Society. I did all of these extracurriculars. And the second you join the military during war, you're afraid to go to college in your uniform. I remember being at UNM trying to change out of my uniform as fast as I could to get to my night classes, because there were people that were protesting and I didn't want them to see it. So I'm saying, hey, I gave up my life for you. There's nothing, I know that some services don't get deployed, like that you have to find something different for me. So my crew says, we're going to find something for you. But till then, we're going to let you go back to New Mexico because we think you need to be around your family. So I come home and I hear nothing. I go to get my medications refilled and I get denied. And I'm like, well, that's not right, right? The next day, I receive a letter in the mail saying I've been medically honorably discharged. Nobody, no human, no supervisor, no person that I deployed with had the nerve to tell me that they had destroyed my body so much that I was being discharged. And the kicker is they discharged me at 10% and sent me a check for $5,000, taxed at 40%. So I got $2,000 and some change, and told they weren't going to cover any of my medical expenses. And from there, like, that was my first advocacy I have ever done in my life. I didn't know you can get a lawyer. I didn't know that there were resources available. Instead, I, on my own, just started writing a pill after a pill. This is what happened. This is how I'm sick. You're telling me you got me sick and I'm going to have to pay for it. And that's all I was originally fighting for, was for medical care, right? And so coming home sick and having them just toss me away because I'm not expendable anymore. And then that moment of advocacy, and then thinking, how many more people out there are like me? How many people are older than me and more debilitated because of toxic exposure, but are afraid to come forward? And they deny, and they hope they disenfranchise you so you don't apply again. And they hope that you die before they get to your records. It is not a joke. It is the truth. Deny till you die.
So
And
Nicole,
I'm too young to die. And
how long did it take you to undertake this advocacy and to get the government to accept responsibility for your health and actually start to care for you, hopefully properly?
So I was discharged in 2008, and I finally won my case in 2014.
And what happened during those 6 years? You had to pay for everything, or you didn't get health care?
I really struggled. I had private jobs that I would, work whatever job because of the healthcare that they offered. During that time, again, I had multiple suicide attempts that were serious, that got me institutionalized. It was the hardest time in my life to know that I had been put through something, that somebody else had done this to me, and then they were gaslighting me, saying that they are not responsible for anything that they did to me. Because when you sign on that line, you become responsible for everything that happens to you, which is another reason why it's hard for me to bridge that that I was innocent, that this wasn't my choice, because they make you feel like it's your choice. Like, that is what you're doing. You're saying you 100% agree to whatever legislators decide, whatever wars, and the onus is on you, right? And it is a strange thing. They literally take somebody who can be bubbly, golden, outgoing, and they deconstruct you into this robot. It took years for me to even figure out who I was. I don't know if I'll ever be that girl again, but I know that I'm finding every day little parts of my old self that I used to be. And the more I advocate And the more wins that I get, and especially the more wins that I get for other people, they give me hope, and they remind me of who I was, and they remind me that things can be better. And they remind me that nobody should have to wait that many years on a pill. Nobody should feel like they're going crazy and they want to take their own life because their health and detriments to their health are their own fault.
I just think, Nicole, too, like you've always, it's so hard to process everything you've said, that just like we could do this to people. And especially you've said it so many times in this Green Amendment movement. And it's been really inspiring to me, this whole that, our country would send you off to war and, expect them to do all these things. And then, sorry, I thought we were frozen for a second. And then, just mess with you like this and just like put your health at risk and not even pay for your medical expenses, not even help with your aftercare, anything like that they just expected you to put your body on the line and you receive absolutely nothing back.
And one of the things, Nicole, to sort of do that transition, so you also talk about how you're now home, you're in New Mexico, you're finding that beautiful person again who you were by fighting for other people. And you are a beautiful person and we see it, and you're so inspirational and you're so powerful and you are bubbly. And there is that part of you that shines through so beautifully in so many moments while you're inspiring others and fighting for others. It's just so beautiful. But one of the other sad, painful things you talk about is how being home in New Mexico, your concerns about the water quality and the air quality in your day-to-day life now here in New Mexico. And I'm not going to do it for you. I'm going to let you, because you do it so powerfully, make that connection with your fight for getting a constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment for your state.
I think that is the cherry on top of, like, the really rotten cherry on top of this miserable Sunday, right? Is that it's one thing to serve your country, serving the United States of America, but I didn't just serve my country. I served New Mexico. I was at the will of the governor. We deployed at the will of the governor. When you come home, the minimum you expect, Republican or Democrat, we all say the same thing: support our troops, right? Thank our troops for their service. When you come home, you have a minimum expectation that your state cares about you. You have a minimum expectation, all of us, that when we go to our faucet and we get a cup of water, that it's clean. That when we're brushing our teeth, it's not like we're back in Iraq and we have to have a bottle of water to pour on our toothbrush and then a bottle of water to rinse because there's no potable water. There is an expectation that the water that goes into your pores in the shower is clean, right? There's an expectation that your state is protecting you, that the food you're eating is coming from clean soil, that the air you are breathing is clean enough not to harm your body. It's a minimum expectation that we think is a right that is not a right, which is why I am fighting for the Green Amendment. When I came home, it was 2 years ago, actually 3, sorry, this pandemic, I started getting really, really, really sick. And my doctors were doing blood work. They were trying to understand it at the VA. We took me off medications, on medications. I take 6 medications to breathe, 2 inhalers, 2 different steroid pills, and then 2 medications that stop acid reflux because my esophageal passage is literally swollen. My vocal cords are always in this shut state because the esophagus is burnt all the way around from what I breathe in. So we were trying to figure out, right? And my doctor said, you know what, you are a guinea pig because we don't know what's going on with you. We have to figure it out. Went through what I was eating, went through my diet. I'm a vegetarian, right? Went through everything, and I'm actually vegan friendly. We rarely eat cheese, but still trying to figure out what was going on with me was the goal. And then finally, one of my doctors hit the nail on the head and told me, can you bring me some of your tap water? And so if anybody in New Mexico listening to this, or anybody where you're at is listening to this, I'm not a scientist, but I'm going to tell you what I was told. We are allowed to drink water that has around 50 various particulates in it, right? So if you have a zero water filter, right, a zero pitcher, like if you go camping, my family goes camping and we take those, what it does is it purifies it to where when you pour it out, there's nothing in it. You'll get a zero reading. Here in the state of New Mexico, depending on where you live, your water particulates are anywhere from 280 to 360. Again, the healthy amount that you're supposed to be drinking is 50. The only thing that makes us different from Detroit is they're putting enough chlorine in our water that our water's not actually coming out brown. Our water, our regular water, was poisoning me. It was interacting with my medications, interacting with my already rotting from the inside body, to where I actually have a doctor's note that allows me to have reverse osmosis in any home that I live in. It's a reasonable accommodation under ADA. And so anywhere that I have lived, I have had to say, okay, I've had to pay the price of getting reverse osmosis. I can't take it out, or else I am the one at cost to a place if I'm renting. So they get a free reverse osmosis anywhere I live, because the water is literally poisonous. And if it's poisonous to me because I am already high risk and I'm already reactive, what is that very same water doing to youth? What is that very same water doing to babies? What is that very same water doing to our elderly population who aren't able to articulate what's happening after they take their medication with a tall glass of water from the tap? What is happening? Furthermore, as we all know, rent, well, you guys might know, not know, here in New Mexico, there's actually a prohibition on rent control, meaning we, the people, can't get together and say, you can't lift our rent, especially if you haven't made any changes to this apartment building. There's actually a prohibition that restricts us from coming together and unionizing and saying, you can't lift up our rent. So at the end of last year, I was actually put on the spot where I was living in downtown, had already put reverse osmosis, everything. My landlord told me that my rent that was $1,280 was going to go up to $1,580. I'm 100% disabled on a fixed income. I can't just go get a part-time job at a gas station to make the difference. I can't, put stuff on Etsy to make a difference. I literally have to live within my means. I'm forced to live within my means. So I decided to use my one-time VA home loan. I'm super lucky in that regard, that one-time VA home loan and a grant that I got to help me offset, because you don't have to pay the 20%, but you still have to pay some, allowed me to get a house. And I remember talking to my therapist and I said, I finally put in for a VA home loan and I'm going to get a home loan. Why? Well, because I can't afford rent and it's actually $980 for me to pay for a house, a mortgage versus rent. And she was like, that's great. And she put a note into my account. The next time I got to my primary care physician, she said, I want to congratulate you on the house, but I have a question. You're not going to live in northern New Mexico, are you? And I originally thought, because we're having such issues with transportation and Raymond G. Murphy is only in Albuquerque and it's so hard to get to services when you live in rural New Mexico. And I said, no, I want to live within a mile from my mom because I'm disabled. So I want to be able to live near her in case something happens. And she goes, okay, good. Because I don't think that you would do well in northern New Mexico because of the methane leaks. You're already stressing your lungs and your esophagus enough that if you put yourself in a climate that is more harmful, that could be a real big detriment to your life. In addition, last summer, right, when I was living downtown in Uphill, I got a call from the VA and they told me not to go outside. And me, because we're in the middle of COVID, at the peak of COVID, I'm thinking, well, don't go outside. It wasn't because of COVID. It was because the air quality. I literally get texts on my phone telling me when it is safe and not safe to go outside because the air quality. So that rotten cherry tells us that the government knows our water is poisoned. The government knows there are methane leaks in northern New Mexico. The government knows that climate change and the fires that happen are bad enough to make already seriously ill people even more sick. They know this, and yet they are not acting on it. They are not doing anything to prevent it. They are not doing anything to protect our right to clean water, clean air, or clean soil, but they are very aware of the damage that is currently happening, the damage that it's propelling, and the future damage that it's going to cause to everybody in time to come.
And I think that's just so powerful, Nicole. And like, again, too, like that you can't live somewhere because you've been so poisoned already. It's going to have so many health effects. And that's why, I think everyone in the Green Amendment movement feels it. I think anyone who's an environmentalist, I think anyone, I'm sure you feel it too, is this like, all the Green Amendment is asking for the government is take care of us, take care of our environment, make sure the water that's coming out of my sink is not also poisoning me, make sure that the air that I'm breathing is good for me and good for future generations. That is, people are just asking for the planet to be taken care of, not just because we're tree huggers that are like trees have a voice and we speak to fish, but because guess what? We all breathe air, we all need water to live. So, and frankly, politicians, the water coming out of your sink should not be any different than the water coming out of my sink, should not be any different than the communities that have been targeted as environmental sacrifice zones. And, you shouldn't, like, you've served this country and you've put your life on the line, and you of all people definitely should not, be out there, and you can't live somewhere because you can't breathe because the government subjected you to poison day in and day out, and now they won't even try and pass a law that could protect the air quality for you, for future generations. So I just, yeah.
And I think that's, the difference is we live in capitalism, right? The water coming out of their pipes is not like mine. They're able to get the huge $10,000 reverse osmosis that cleans all of the water coming out of every single pipe in the house, where I'm only able to afford, the $200 one that goes in my sink. That's my primary source of water. And so this pay to play is killing us. What we are asking the government, what we're asking our legislators right now, today, for House Joint Resolution 2 and Senate Joint Resolution 2, is simply allow us to make that decision. Allow us, the people who already have this assumption that what we have is clean, and that what you guys are doing at all levels of the government, from municipal, local, state, federal, that the assumption that you have our best interests in mind are upheld. Why would you want to deny that? Why would you want to push back on our right to vote on it? If the people say, hey, you know what? I want New Mexico to be open to business. I want Facebook here. I want Hollywood here. I want Amazon here. I want hydrogen hubs here. And we, the people, say that that's in our best interest and that is above water, soil, and air, then let us make that decision. But they know that that is not in our best interest. They know, with us having 23 tribes and 19 pueblos, that we are a minority majority state. So that makes that idea of BIPOC folks so much more intense. And yet the compilation of our legislature is a lot of rich white folks, right? So when we're saying, give us a chance to make this vote, give us a chance to say what's most important, they don't want to. Why? Because they've been able to slip by time and time again, allowing bad actors to come and grow and produce and then leave our state, not just areas, a sacrifice zone. Another little kicker to this is I live on the west side. I've now been redistricted into CD2. I am literally right next to where this proposed Santolina build is going to be. So all of the construction, the roads, the emissions, the houses, and the lack of water, the size of Rio Rancho is going to be right next to me. So not only have I been subjected to the government historically in my past and currently living with the consequences, they're getting ready to compound it. Why? Because money talks. Money talks.
And the other day I was sitting in the gallery listening to the Senate, the New Mexico Senate, talk about the proposed New Mexico Green Amendment and which committees of the Senate should have to consider it. And it was, the sad thing is, after nearly 30 years of activism and environmental advocacy, I am still shocked when I hear people stand up for industry at the expense of people. And to hear Senator Purtle and Senator Moores and Senator Cervantes stand up and advocate for the oil and gas industry to say that the New Mexico Green Amendment, the right of all people to clean water, clean air, and healthy environments, should not be allowed to advance because it would have a cost for the oil and gas industry, and that was worse for the people of New Mexico than protecting their constitutional rights to a clean and healthy environment, was disturbing and shocking beyond the pale. And they have no shame when they stand up and do that. They have no shame. And they will come back and say, we were simply advocating that it get reviewed by the Finance Committee. No, that's not what you were advocating for. You were advocating against the Green Amendment, saying it should not be allowed to be added to the New Mexico Constitution because it would have potentially economic impacts, profit impacts on the oil and gas industry. And therefore, the bodies of the people of New Mexico should be allowed to continue to be poisoned by water pollution, air pollution, future generations devastated by the climate crisis that the oil and gas industry is foisting upon us. All because having a Green Amendment might actually require them to be more mindful about the impacts that they're having on the environment. And what I always say is, I mean, how many times, right? Nicole, Annika, we've all heard the oil and gas industry come up to the front of any room and say, we are good for the environment. We are good for the climate. We protect the air. We protect the water. We're good citizens. I have children too. The oil and gas executives say, I care about my children. You know, we are good for the environment. Well, the response is, if you are truly good for the environment, if you truly believe that, then you should be front of the line to support the passage of a Green Amendment in any state in our nation. And if you are advocating against the Green Amendment, it means that you think that the profits that you are putting in your bank account and your back pocket are more important than the people of the communities where you live. And it is truly shocking. And those legislators that stand up and speak out time and time again against the Green Amendment, they should be ashamed of themselves.
What is profit, right? What is my life worth? Even to Republicans, right? I was a 13-year Republican, right? Before I met Bernie Sanders. I did everything that even Republicans would want. I'm the daughter who graduated high school a year early, never got in trouble, joined the military, served my country, came back, continued getting an education, being a proactive member in my community. What is my life worth? So if we're talking profit, what are bodies inside of New Mexico that are too ill to work worth? We're no longer generating the human capital you need to make that profit. And maybe it's not going to affect you right now, but in 10 years, the same rich people who think they're going to make money off of our bodies, I can't work. I am literally now so disabled by toxins that I can't generate a profit for somebody. I can't generate a profit for an organization or an industry. So that profit idea is so short-sighted, because when you take somebody's health, they are unable to generate profits that you need, because it's not Bezos making billions. It's the people working under Bezos making billions for him. And if they are sick and unable to work, then he's not making the profits that he needs. So that idea of profits is absolutely short-sighted. But the truth is we got like Representative Momayestis's wife in the pocket of big fossil fuels. And he's a West Side Dem. He's a Democrat on the West Side. And his argument on record with the West Side Dems is that him and Representative Joy Garrett is that right now the EPA does enough to protect us. And we all know that's a lie. Under the Trump administration, any federal administration can come and destroy EPA regulations. So unless there is something in our state constitution protecting us, we are always in the crosshairs, always. And then that idea of profit, going back to it one more time, China's not our biggest enemy. Russia's not our biggest enemy. Global warming and climate change is going to be our biggest enemy. And what happens when the water starts coming inland and people start trying to come through the borders? It is going to be my brothers and sisters yet again out there fighting the fires, out there fighting people trying to come inland, out there subjecting themselves to the same toxins, the same issues that happened in Iraq, but this time because we are not taking proper steps to stop the global impact of what we are doing. And when we don't have an earth, no one profits. No one.
No, exactly. And I mean, I even at my time at the Capitol having some conversations with legislators that were probably are still obstacles to the Green Amendment. You know, one of the things I heard from one was, well, let's just pass better environmental legislation. We should just keep passing good environmental legislation. And I was just so flabbergasted that that was the response, because what have we been doing since the 50s, 60s? Passing environmental legislation. Like, sure, could we improve some things, but just passing legislation that each one in itself is going to take 3 to 5 years to just get through. It's going to take another 3 to 5 years for the EPA to figure out. And frankly, I think the EPA most of the time is just like, how can I do the bare minimum? Like, I know there are people that in the EPA that fight really hard, but there's a big standard that's just like, how can I just check every single box? And guess what? People still get poisoned. Maybe it's not the maximum amount of poison, but it's still poison. And it's just like, this just better environmental legislation. Well, we've been doing that, and people are still getting poisoned. People are dying. People are like, kids are being born with defects and things like that because of what's in the water, because of what's in the air. People are burying their family members so much earlier than they have to because of what's in the water and what's in the air. And that's all been regulated since the 60s. Like, the time of regulation is done and over with. The people are ready to speak up. And the fact that any legislator would try to make some excuse of, well, the people shouldn't have that right. And, you know, and that's the thing too in New Mexico is, all we're saying is, like you just said, Nicole, let the people decide. If the people of New Mexico don't want the Green Amendment, they can decide that. But it's not right of the New Mexico legislature to take that away from the people to make their voice heard.
Do you know how scary it is to be so sick and trying to produce a healthy baby? Like, I am so scared that at no fault of its own, that the fault of the government and what they subjected me to, and current lack of environmental standards, that something really bad is happening inside my body. That this is the most difficult period I've ever had in my life. I was hospitalized twice. I've had multiple IVs. I'm on bed rest. And I am absolutely terrified that a decision that I made when I was 19 and the continued abuse on my body by my state is going to yield something really awful to something so innocent that hasn't even had an opportunity to breathe this air. It is so scary to say that there is a profit that is more important than an innocent child that has not even been brought into this world. And at no fault of my own, what it does to somebody mentally, a woman mentally, to think that I did this, that there's something wrong with me, that I chose, but I didn't have any choice. I needed to go to school. I needed to do something with my life, or I was going to be stuck in the same rut. To know that this is happening and somebody's saying that a profit is more important, that we already have laws. Well, we know that the EPA will find out that a big organization like Exxon or in another sacrifice zone has been putting toxins into the water and slap them with $100,000 fine when they're a multi-billion-dollar company. Those kind of fines mean nothing. And the worst part of what has been going on with the Green Amendment is there was an argument about monetary damages, and straight from the playbook from the GOP, we went ahead and readjusted the Green Amendment to remove monetary damages, to make unfriendly dams like Ivy Soto and Cervantes happy with this, and yet still they sent it to the Finance Committee. People who are being endorsed by green environmental organizations like Hemp Hill, right, have put it into a third committee trying to kill the bill without having to go on record that they are for or against it. And for what? I'm not profiting. You're not profiting. We're all being harmed at the price of lining their pockets. And this is I've never felt more compelled to be forward about my story, because there is something inside of me that has no choice now. Maya, I have no clue how you've been able to do this with kids for so long without just raging against the machine, because we thought that Democrats were on our side. A Green Amendment has been written into the platform of the Democratic Party of New Mexico since 2020. And here we are in 2022 with the majority of our heat coming from Democrats. Why do we even have two parties when they are working in cahoots for the same thing? And that is the enrichment of themselves and their lives at the cost of marginalized, disenfranchised BIPOC folks like myself who have lived in New Mexico since prior to its statehood.
The thing that I also think it's so important for people to understand, and so, I have been raging against the machine, and that's what this Green Amendment movement is all about. That's what the advocacy is really trying to, as you said, not just take on industry for their bad acts, but take on government officials, whether they're elected or they're appointed or they're in an agency, for their failure to stand up and defend the people, to stand up and defend the environment, to stand up and defend the natural resources that have no voice in our human world unless we, the people, give it a voice. And the truth is about those laws, this nonsense that we'll just pass more laws and that'll make it better. The problem with the way the environmental laws are written here in the United States of America, across the board, every state across the nation, at the federal level, it's all about reviewing and legalizing pollution and degradation through permitting. It is saying we are going to think about pollution at the end of the process. We're going to accept it as a foregone conclusion. We're going to give you a permit that is literally going to legalize it. Our system of laws is not about preventing harm. And if you implement every single environmental law exactly as it's written, you will still have devastating consequences for people's water, for their air. You will still be facing climate catastrophe. Communities of color, indigenous communities, low-income communities will still be targeted and disproportionately harmed by the pollution that is spewed into their air, into their water, into their soils, into their landscapes, and into their bodies. And that is the problem with the way the laws are written. And the people have nothing to grab onto to challenge that. If a legislature passes a law and the governor signs it, that's it. If it legalizes pollution, we, the people, we lose. We have nothing to turn to except maybe, hopefully, next time at the next election, electing better people to office. But the Green Amendment gives the power back to the people. So when our government officials put in place those laws that will result in devastating consequences for the environment, or they implement laws that are pretty good on their face, but the way they get implemented sacrifices communities, then we, the people, can turn to the Constitution, whether it's through our advocacy or through the courts, and hold them accountable, because the Constitution is us we, the people, taking our power back. And that's why it's so powerful. And that's why it's so important. And that's why it's so offensive for legislators to say, we'll pass a few more laws, because they themselves know that the way they're writing those laws, they're writing in pollution to the water, the air, the soils, the bodies of the people, the devastation of species, of the climate, that is literally written into the law and legalized. It's not about stopping harm. It's not about preventing harm. But that's what the Green Amendment does, is it takes all those laws that are already on the books and it helps us change the way they're interpreted and applied. So yes, they are still going to be applied in a way that it's about permits and permitting, but there's going to be this overarching protection that says, if you implement that law the way it's written, if you implement it the way it's written, and it has devastating consequences for the people and for their environmental rights, then something can be done about it because of the Constitution, because you are not allowed here in the United States of America, you are not allowed to infringe upon the constitutional rights of the people that are written into the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. It's not allowed because we, the people, said it's not allowed. So that's why it's so powerful, and that's why it's so offensive to hear industry and legislators, just spew that lie.
And I mean, I worked with Ole on getting paid sick leave passed last year, and to do that, they made us cut out certain populations. And right now, one of the same people who's really trying to harm the Green Amendment is trying to create the governing body that decides who is eligible for this and who is not. So it's literally like you said, Mai, we've seen this before. We've seen it in New Mexico. We've seen it in other realms that primarily help marginalized, impoverished BIPOC folks, that they're saying, okay, we're going to give you this, but we're actually going to be in control of how we designate this law, who's eligible for this, and we're going to make it really hard. It's funny because people used to tell me all the time when I was working, right? And I'm going to name names, Fidelity Investments. I was working at Fidelity Investments. They knew I was disabled. I'm covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I was given reasonable accommodations. And they refused to listen to those reasonable accommodations. And every time I missed a day, they would tell me I need a doctor's note to come back. And my doctor said, no, you don't. You've already been given reasonable accommodations. And Fidelity Investments made the decision to go ahead and fire me and take the fine for violation against the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it was no big deal to them. So this idea of we're going to implement a law after a law after a law after a law, and that's going to make it better. Well, we can say there, segregation has ended. Black folks are able to vote, brown folks are able to vote, indigenous folks are able to vote. But we see right here in our state that they're actually not. If you're an indigenous person who doesn't have a mailing address, then you don't get to vote because you need a mailing address on your ID, right? Unless you have already gone through it. We see the disenfranchisement of Black and brown bodies being able to vote. So us simply saying we already have this law on the books that remedies this is just a flat out lie. And this is another way they're trying to flat out lie, but this time about the environment. And the environment does not discriminate. The environment is going to harm you as much as it's going to harm me. For somebody who's living in the Heights right now, who does not know this about their water, they're being poisoned, right? For kids who are in private school, and those private schools don't have reverse osmosis going through the whole schools, they're being poisoned. For rich people in Hollywood that live in northern New Mexico, you're breathing in that methane just the same as anybody on any of the sovereign nations around you are breathing it in. It does not discriminate. It's going to harm all of us. And it's the people who know this that are able to proactively take measures because they have the money, they have the funds, and they're the ones writing the bills. And that's what's absolutely wrong. This should not be blocked by anybody. This should go to the people for a vote. They're scared it's going to go to the people for a vote because then we have control on making sure the decisions that they make are not harming us more than it is helping us. Do we want our state open for business? Yes. Do we want to be prosperous? Yes. Do we want job opportunities? Yes. But not at the cost of our physical bodies, not at the cost of our kids and our kids' kids. We are a water resource scarce state. And there is no other option. Water is life. And the fact that people don't want to protect that with every inch of themselves tells you exactly what kind of character they are.
I don't think we can do any better than that for a most empowering closing thought to this most empowering interview. Nicole, you are a powerhouse. Your baby is going to be a powerhouse. And you truly are, as Annika said, you are an inspiration to all of us. And we are so grateful for you. And before I give Annika some parting words, I want to know, is there anything that you want to tell people, whether they're in New Mexico or beyond, what they should be doing to help you in your efforts to get environmental rights in New Mexico and really across the nation? Because as you said, pollution knows no boundaries. So water comes across state lines, so does air. And of course, the climate crisis affects us all.
I think that the first tool that we are taught is to talk about it, to talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to your loved ones. Right now, if you're in New Mexico, if you're afraid to talk, you can always donate to the campaign. If you are not afraid, tweet and Facebook and tag the people who are in opposition. It is an election year in the House. There are some people who ought not be there. Become proactive, because if you're not proactive, you're part of the problem. But it's not all our fault. We have to educate the person to the left and the right. People don't know that our right to clean water is not protected. It's an assumption. We literally assume that we are drinking clean water and that the people in Detroit are like a one-off thing, but it's not. talk to people, tell people, be humble, contact your representatives, contact your senators, contact them on a federal level, and don't stop. And when you think you can't, there's always an alternative. There's always some way you can get involved in a postcard campaign, a door hanging campaign, a phone bank, text bank. There is always some place somewhere in time that you can be a part of the solution.
I mean, I think, yeah, that just, I don't even have any parting words because Nicole, you say it all. And I can't. I agree with Mom Maya. I never know how to do it on this podcast, that you are a powerhouse. Your child is going to be a powerhouse. And I mean, you bring tears to my eyes about your concern, but like, I just know you are going to be such an amazing mother, and your child is going to be loved. And frankly, your child is going to be stood up for. And I think that is one of the most, I know that even before I came into this world, my mom was out fighting for me to have a better planet. And before your child has even come into this world, before you even knew you had a child, you were going to have a child, you have been out here trying to make the world a better place. And I just think that is so beautiful, because there's like a quote that's, knowing the true meaning of humanity is planting a tree whose shade you'll never sit under. And that is what, you are doing. That is what so many people in the Green Amendment movement are doing. And it's just, I'm inspired by you. That's all I can say. That's like the best way to sum it up. And you are just an amazing human being, really, truly. And any legislators that are listening to this, you better listen to Nicole, because going past Green Amendment, guys.
We honor you, Nicole, and we thank you. Wow, Annika, what a powerhouse. I think it has been a true honor in this Green Amendment movement, and really in environmental advocacy work as the Delaware Riverkeeper. You come across so many amazing people, inspirational people, thoughtful people, people who make it happen, because they're willing to go out front and tell their stories, and people who make it happen because they're willing to sit quietly at home and type up the notes from a meeting, or go door to door and hang door hangers with information on their neighbors' doors or mailboxes, and not be front and center, but do what they have to do. It takes everybody. But when you have somebody like a Nicole who is willing to take such a deeply impactful and hurtful story and bring it into the light and use it to inspire others to get active and to challenge decision makers to do what's better and what's right, there is just nothing like it. I am so honored to know Nicole, to work with Nicole. She's going to be included in the second edition of the Green Amendment book, because she's just a true inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, it's stories like Nicole's, it's people like Nicole, first off, like you said, everybody is important in this movement, whether you're staying at home and typing up notes, or whether you're, out there testifying. But I just will never get over that there are people like Nicole, people suffering like Nicole, and, people like Nicole that are brave enough to get up and share their story, and that there are legislators who pretend like it doesn't exist, who pretend like people Nicole don't exist, who sit in their ivory tower and make up because that's what they're doing, make up some facts about why, industry is more important than the ability to breathe, more important than somebody being able to feel like their child will have a healthy planet to grow up in. I will never understand it, because it hurts me to my core. And it's really hard to listen to people like Nicole and it is, I mean, I am at a loss for words when Nicole tells her story. It's like, I don't know what to say, because it's unimaginable that it has happened to her, that it is happening to her, and that there are people who are just like, I'm just going to pretend like that story doesn't exist. It's just ridiculous. And I just lost for words,
To hear her give voice to the fears for her child, not just for the child, the world that her child is coming into, but as she said, that her exposure to toxins over the course of her life while serving in the military, her fear about what that is doing to the health of this child that she is looking forward to bringing into the world. There is just, it is, as you said, there are just no words to describe it. It tears at my heart, because I know, when when you are pregnant and looking forward to having a child and you don't have those impacts, it's scary. You worry all the time. And so to hear her give voice to this extra unimaginable layer of fear is really just heart-wrenching. And as she said, and to have Senator Purtle, Senator Moore, Senator Cervantes, all those legislators that are opposed to constitutional environmental rights, they very literally are saying with their words that industry and industry profits are more important than Nicole's baby. That is shocking to the core, but that is at the heart of it, what they are saying about every single child, every single person that is here on this earth when they take that position. And industry is not more important than people, and it is not more important than the earth. And we cannot let them get away with it. And that's why I'm so proud to be with you, Annika, to be with Nicole, to be with our partners at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network and Green Amendments for the Generations, Bridget and Molly and Cameron and Tracy and Faith and so many others, to be fighting the good fight day in and day out to protect all the people and all parts of nature that are part of our world.
Yeah, and I just think for anyone listening to this, we set out to do this podcast to bring the Green Amendment message, to uplift voices that are not heard, because the simple fact of the matter is, I think I had a class that was about sustainable farming. And at the end, the teacher, said to us, like, what's your review? This is my first time doing it. And I actually started crying, and a few other students did, because we said, this is the first class we've had in the environmental studies and the environmental science department where we didn't just talk about doom and gloom and how the planet is dying, there's nothing we can do, but we looked at and learned about real solutions that people are out doing every day to make the world a better place. So Nicole's story is very heavy. John Beard's story is very heavy. Rachel Dawn Davis talking about eco-anxiety is very heavy. But I think everybody listening to this, in each of those stories, we hope that you walk away with that little bit of hope, or a lot of bit of hope, hopefully, that the Green Amendment is something that's going to change the world, that organizations like Delaware Riverkeeper Network, Green Amendments for the Generations, Water Spirit, Port Arthur Community Action Network, all these organizations that we've had on are people out there in the world doing everything they can. And frankly, they outnumber the people in power. And it's just about getting the tools like the Green Amendment to make change, and just how anybody can do anything. You can be taking meeting notes to being like Lukey and Kubi and paragliding and being out in nature and trying to get people just out there. There's so many things. And so if anybody walks away from an episode and you're like, wow, that was really heavy and I'm kind of sad, think about the message that each of these people that we've had on are doing something, that they're not, that maybe they have been subjected to some awful circumstance at the hands of government, at the hands of environmental pollution, but each one of them has taken that and now gone out and started their own movement or become a part of a movement to make this world a better place, not just for themselves, but for others. So if you just are feeling a little bit down, I hope you realize the point is to give you hope, and at the end be like, yeah, you know what? I'm mad about whatever you're mad about, and go do whatever you can each day to make it better. So that's just, these are meant to be hopeful. And I hope that people feel inspired and, do get that sense of, be sad about what you've just heard, but then go be the person to help make it different for future generations.
Be sad, but then go get active.
In any way you can.
In any way you can.
And a great way to do that is to go to forthegenerations.org and go read some of our materials, find your state for a Green Amendment, make a donation, become a member, sign a petition. That is
powerful. That's important. And that is really the point. You have to get active. And I think Nicole's pearls of wisdom, so many of them, but silence is acquiescence to the status quo. At least that's the way I interpret what she said. Silence is acquiescence to the status quo. It is letting the bad guys get away with it. It is, and the way you help us turn things around is you get active. Use your voice, use the power of the pen, write a letter to the editor, hang door hangers on the doors of your neighbors. And as Annika said, make a donation, because all of these communities that we work with in Green Amendments for the Generations, part of what they need are the resources that we can help bring to them through our work, to get the word out so that they can get their friends and neighbors educated and involved and stepping up and speaking out in whatever way moves them. So thank you for joining us on this episode of Green Jeans, and we look forward to the next episode. Not sure who we're going to have or what the fact check will be, but guaranteed it will be interesting, it will be inspirational, it will be uplifting, and it will give you a way to get involved and make a difference.
All right, until next time.
Until next time.